I'm Janine Nodder, and this is Chatting with Janine. My guest this week might be familiar to some of you. He's a pastor here in Merrimack. He's an author. He knows the guy who started the Weather Channel. He used to have two shows on Merrimack TV. One was The Impact Zone, and the other is the title of today's show and also his Facebook page, The Storm Warning. So welcome, Pastor Ron.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So what do you do for fun?
Chase storms, but like I was telling you before the show, there's not a whole lot to chase right now. So yeah, I do a lot of things actually. I do the lake. I take my little dog out. At the real high, I always tell people at church and elsewhere, I say if I'm not chasing storms and hurricanes, I'm usually on the kayak on Natticook Lake, just kind of floating around, you know, enjoying nature. Maybe have my Bible out there or something, or a good book, whatever. So there's a very low key me, and then there's the really high octane me.
So I'm just curious,
Yeah.
What is more fun, a hurricane or a tornado?
I would say a tornado, just because they're very small. So after a tornado hits, if you want to help people, it's really easy to help because the path is so narrow. It can be a really bad path of destruction, but it's easy to help. And it's also easy to get a hotel room. 20 miles out of the way and there's a place to stay. Hurricane, there's no water, there's no food, there's no hotel room, there's nothing for 200 miles all around. Even if they don't get hit, everything's closed and evacuated. So it's very inconvenient in a hurricane, very inconvenient.
So before the show, you were telling us stories, and I'm like, so you've come close to dying many times, and you still chase storms.
Yeah, apparently so. I was telling Janine, I was going over some of the videos this week, and Josh, my son, some people probably remember him
Josh
doing
Moore,
shows and stuff.
he was
a
a state
rep here.
representative.
Zach served with you guys.
Yep.
He was sharing some of his videos. He's got more than I do, and I'm like, man, I look at some of these videos, and I said, I can imagine people do think that's crazy. I mean, from floodwater, and we never tried to put ourselves in position. But like I tell people, if you're in a hurricane or tornado, that's why we tell people not, if they don't know what they're doing, not to get out of them, not to go outdoors, because so many things can go wrong. I mean, there's stuff flying in the air, all those things. So yeah.
You ever see a cow go by?
No cows. I've seen big black dots or things floating around a tornado, spinning around, and it looked like maybe a shrub or something. If it was a shrub, it was usually a huge tree. Like maybe a 100-foot pine.
Wow.
And I've seen what looked like a little piece of tin it was when we were young. In fact, the youngest son, Caleb, he was 11, lives in Manchester now. It hit the road down in front of us, and I said, let's just go see what that was. It was an SUV. Nobody was in it. Nobody was hurt. It was an SUV floating around, just like a leaf floating around. So,
my gosh, the impact of the storm.
Yeah.
So your other show was The Impact Zone, but that wasn't about storms.
No, the Impact Zone was about culture. It was kind of the pastoral side of me, but it wasn't really preachy. It really wasn't religious-y, if that's a word. It was more about culture and impact and how people and citizens and where we came from old school. I'm really big on the scripture and history and how the scripture was very your basis of science, economics, urban planning, EPA, all those things came from the books of Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus under Moses. A lot of people don't even know that. They really did. So that show was about that. I'd bring in those pieces, and I would deal with current events that were happening and stuff, and I'll just talk to the guys in here and said, yeah, maybe down the road I'll resume them again. They were a lot of fun to do and everything. So yeah.
Yes, and the storm warning. So on Facebook you have a lot of followers, and if there's a storm even locally, we can go to your page.
Absolutely. I've done, boy, in the last few years, everybody's come out of the woodwork. There are lots of young people, and I was telling you beforehand, they knew who to do flash and dash. These guys know how to put all kinds. I watch them, and I'm like, they do a better job than we did in studio, in the real, like down south when I was at Florida State training for media broadcast. These guys in their offices at home have better tech than we did back then. Right. So I'm not good at that. That's not my zone. So I was telling you before, this is one of the things I do, which is when I used to do a lot of research at Florida State when I first moved up here 20 years ago now. August will be 20 years we moved up here.
Wow. Time goes by.
It does. And I used to do research at Harvard and Yale. Then they kind of cut that out. Then you had to be a researcher. Then you had to be a student or a professor. I was neither one. So over time, I got my own collection. So as I did that, I began to read these books. So I spend a lot of my time when I'm not chasing or doing ministry or doing things in the town still, as we've kind of rebooted after COVID, collecting books like this. I was sharing this with you earlier, that it's called Warmer Weather Boom in the North. It's a book's written by a guy named William Baxter. And I found this book, I think maybe 4 years ago now. And I got, and this is the better copy. The other one's my study copy. There's only 2 copies I know of that exist. Those two.
And you have them both.
Yeah, exactly. Because I have the one I can read from, and this one here I can show it off. But his name is William Baxter, and I told you he was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman. He was He was a scientist, an engineer, a meteorologist, everything like that. He was looking to invest money. This is written in 1954, and he was talking about global warming and how the planet was warming up.
It
and
was
how
warming. It was warming.
he said everything will shift 400 miles north. He said New England will be more like North Carolina. North Carolina will be like Florida. He says that the heat waves are. It's just interesting when it gives you perspective.
Weren't we freezing in the 70s? Didn't they tell us we were
Global
going to
cooling.
another ice age?
And so I've got tons of documents and maps and news stories. I told you I've got newspapers dating back to 1780 from here in New Hampshire.
That's interesting.
And it's just the news they talk about, but the weather stories they tell. I mean, again, I've told people some of the worst weather ever in America was in the mid 1900s, from the mid 30s all the way to probably the early 70s, mid 60s. If anybody in the audience is listening, and you, especially if you lived up here, you did 38 hurricane hit New England, devastated this area. That was just a bad hurricane. In fact, in that hurricane in 38 that came through, the eye went right over, probably just to our west in the Monadnocks, came right over top of Concord. And I think the official wind gust in Concord, or official meaning there were real observations, over 150 miles an hour.
Wow. And on the top of Mount Washington, what was it?
That one was, believe it or not, in the hurricanes like that, they're about what they are on the ground level, because the winds in a hurricane decrease.
Didn't they recently top their
They did.
fastest wind? Yeah.
The fastest wind now is in Australia, they say. 254, I think it was 237, 238 on top of Mount Washington way back in the early 1900s. I still think we should lay the claim to fame for New Hampshire. just me. Because I mean, I don't know what happened in the Australia when I'm trying to find some of the data, and it's.
Do you ever get scared when you're chasing these storms?
You
and
know
almost
what?
die?
No, because I think what happens, I told you, is I'm watching the videos afterward, I'm like, man, that looks dangerous. I mean, there's power lines falling down. They'll see the video here in just a minute.
Well, why don't we look at
some of the
I've
flood
seen
video?
One
I mean,
WMUR
these are just
as
a
well.
few of them. We used to run on WMUR, NECN, all these different groups we used to. So this here is Cheyenne. This is maybe 5 years ago. It's all mostly made. This is a tornado west of Cheyenne by about 20 miles. We pulled over the side of the road. This thing was developing, and it looks like it's a long way away. Here, it's about 8 miles to our northwest. We always tried to keep
we're at
distance.
a safe distance.
Yes, they don't do that anymore. They don't do the chasers now are right literally inside of them. I mean, they literally gut core punch them, and they love it. The more damage you get on your vehicle and everything. So, and it's really funny. It was really funny because the other day I saw one of the chasers say, "Boy, when you get to be 40, you're going to find out how tiring it is driving like this." And I'm thinking, 40? That's a kid to me, man. I said, Lord, I was driving, and when these kids were born, I was still already driving my car. But you do, and the older you get, you do. As you change with age, you have to accommodate that. So I'm more careful. I let Josh, if we do hurricane chasing together a lot. Now, he's married now, so, a little different there. But
Where is this?
This is Tampa. This is a flood surge that came in with, I believe it was, I'm going to probably get the name right. He would remember it. It was 3 years ago. It was during the COVID pandemic, and which is one reason you could travel.
Car?
That's not my car. It's somebody else's. This was not predicted. That surge was not supposed to happen. When we came back out of Clearwater, St. Pete, this is Bayshore Boulevard. We get to Bayshore. I said, let's go check it out. And the surge is 3 feet deep coming in, caught everybody off guard.
My daughter likes to go to St. Pete.
Yeah, so this was a huge deal, did a lot of damage. This was just a minimal tropical storm. This wasn't even a major hurricane. In Tampa Bay, if that had been a real hurricane, that water would have been 10 feet higher.
Wow.
If it was a Cat 3, that water would have been 20 feet higher.
So what was it? It was a cat.
It was just a tropical storm.
Tropical,
in a week,
not even
50
a cat.
miles an hour. 50 mile an hour wind.
And what does CAT stand for? Category?
Category, yeah. Okay. Category 74, they start, and it goes up about 20, 25 miles an hour each category. And the way tornadoes and hurricanes are, everybody understands physics out there, it's exponential increase. So just because you go one category, it's not like double the trouble. It's more like 10 times the intensity.
Yes.
Same way they gauge bombs and
earthquakes.
Yeah, exactly.
And where's this?
Same place. This is actually looking toward the hospital. Tampa General is across the harbor there. Those are the bridges, and that's Bayshore Boulevard. The water's just pouring over it. You can see it coming in. Yeah, see that? Yeah, it's crazy. I had stuff from Hampton Beach, too. I was out there this winter for the 2 flood events that hit there, and that was a little freaky. It was throwing boulders over top of my car. I finally pulled off the road. Well, they had shut down the road behind me.
Who's that? I just saw somebody in a blue
Yeah,
t-shirt.
that was probably Josh being crazy out there.
Right.
Yeah,
Josh got some airtime.
There he is. Oh, he always got airtime. He was always out there, take pictures of me. Again, that's before he was married. It might be a little different now. This is the snowstorm, the Buffalo Blizzard. of 22. Yeah, because it wasn't last year; it was the year before. They had 2 big events. One crippled the city, did a lot of damage, but they had 50 inches. This was the one where they had 77 inches, and the Buffalo Bills Stadium was buried. Ooh. So it was 77 inches in 24 hours. I still think that is a record snowfall ever for the USA, period.
Really?
24 hours. Lots of storms have dropped it in 3 or 4 days.
Somebody was walking
That
there.
was 6 inches. 6 inches an hour coming down. So that's cars. Everything you see there, that's the cars all buried. My car's in there. There was a big F350 Ford truck parked on this side. That's him right there.
Oh.
That's the big old huge truck, and it's gone. So the base of his truck's 1.5 feet in the air. It was pretty incredible. That's about midway through the storm. Thunder and lightning all night long. Just incredible.
You must have loved it.
I did.
Yeah.
So I take my books, I study, and get ready for the power to go out, which it did. And to experience it, this is the nighttime. I think at this time we're at about 50 inches.
Was it bright out?
Nope, that's the light, the floodlight shining, and the snow just pouring down. Lots of lightning, though. A lot of lightning in these storms, which they covered them quite extensively, too.
Palm trees.
That's Hurricane Ian. Everybody remembers that one that hit last year in Port Charlotte, destroyed Fort Myers. We're about 10 miles north of Fort Myers at this time. We're about 2 miles from the bay, so we're not in the major flood zone, but you see the parking lot starting to go underwater here, and the trees whipping around. Winds here are probably about 120, and they're probably gusting to 140. We're next to a Walmart parking lot. We've backed into a safe area. That's what I do.
What's a safe area in a storm?
That's where the wind. That's where the winds. I'm out of the wind flow, and when the hurricane's coming around, and I know the wind's going to shift, I can shift my van. I can shift with it. In other words, I'm not just safe in one direction. I'm as safe as in many directions as I can be. But it's got the big heavy tiles on top of the store. They start ripping. You could hear them ripping off the store.
Tiles?
Yeah, and being tossed into the parking lot.
Have you tried walking in a hurricane?
I have. I think I did a Hurricane Laura in Lake Charles a few years ago. And I got to be honest with you. You get older, and it's like, I hate to say that because I'm in pretty good shape, but you're out there in those winds, and they hit 100-mile-an-hour gust, and they'll pick you up like a kite. And I'm not a little guy, but they blow you around, and you're
so what category can you still go out and be safe and not get blown away?
Safe.
Literally.
I'd say once the winds break 100, you're pretty much in unsafe territory. There are videos out there of guys in Key West. I can't remember what hurricane it was, and the winds were hitting 160. They said. And I'm watching them, and they're flapping, and they're doing this, and I'm like, man, at 160, you're airborne. At 160, motorcycles are bouncing around. So, that's the big thing, the debris that flies around.
And what category was the SUV flying around?
That was a tornado. That was a high-end F3. At one time, they debate between F3 and F4, a very strong tornado.
And is this a video too? Or
I'm not sure. I think, yes, it is. This is us leaving the wall. This is us saying, hey, let's go out to the interstate. So we're going through the flood surge, and the winds are still cranking over 100.
And it didn't flood your brake?
Well, we're pretty awesome. No,
Now, is this the ride where you told me about, that where you went over the bridge?
No, this is not. I tried to find that one. Josh has those videos. I haven't even seen those videos in a little while, but we're going to get them together. We'll see when we go chasing here in a couple of... We're going to actually be out there probably 2 or 3 weeks. Charlene
so
and
I heard it's supposed to be a pretty big hurricane season.
The hurricane season could be off the charts. Just for a lot of...
cruise.
So I've got a crew that I talk to all the time. They're meteorologists. They're all very accomplished people. These are, they're still working in the industry. Some are professors. One was a Harvard professor. He does sunspots, but they all get into climatology and stuff, and they were all saying before the other forecasts come out, they issued their forecast in December, they sent it to me, and they called it the hurricane season. Now, these guys believe in God, okay? But even so, they said this is the hurricane season from hell.
Oh.
They said it's going to be off the charts. So then Colorado State came out with it, the Hurricane Center, AccuWeather, and they're all pretty much on the same page because everything's just kind of in place for it. The La Nina, El Nino transition we're doing.
Yeah, can you explain that? La Nina, El Nino?
That has to do with Pacific waters, the coolness or heat, if they're hot or cold. And when you're looking at a map, depending on whether it's hot or cold, depends on which one of those you're in. And the reason that matters is because that hot or cold water in the Pacific, especially because the Pacific is like 5 times the size of the Atlantic, the Pacific will regulate the jet stream. So it also affects tornado season. And the reason tornado season could be very active for April into May, which May is usually pretty active. And we're down right now. The count's down so far this year. We've had very few violent tornadoes, great, and we're about 30% down in tornadoes. By the end of this week or next week, we'll have probably, if you're watching this show, so we're talking the end of April, by the end of April, I say we'll probably have 50 to 100 more tornadoes. And everybody will be going, oh, it's the apocalypse. That would be very normal. Very normal for the USA to have 50 to 100 more tornadoes.
Well, there's so many other things going on in the world that it makes you think it's the apocalypse.
Exactly. It just kind of adds on to it.
I'm from California originally, so I've often heard the term El Nino and La Nina.
And it has a big impact on California. It's been funny, and I won't dig deep because it's too many details involved, but they thought one thing was going to happen in California the last 12 months, but another thing happened. It was supposed to be dry, for instance, last year, and it just got pounding rainstorms because everything wasn't acting like it should. Now, if you're someone who believes the climate is shifting, you would say, that's it. What I tell people is I don't think we are smart about weather as we think we are. About the time we think we figure out stuff, not so much. So we're still learning. Meteorology is a very new science, really. In fact, most of science is fairly new. When I say new, I mean they were making roads, in the biblical days. They were building highways.
Yeah, they're still around.
Right, okay, exactly. They still use them in Israel and stuff, and all over the place. Russia, all these beautiful areas, I think. Weather, we really only know too much about it for the last 150 years. After the Civil War, we really began to adapt stuff, and it wasn't until the 1900s we began. Satellite and radar didn't come out to the 50s.
Wow.
And there were mistakes.
So, I mean, if you're young, that sounds like long time ago, but the older you get, the more you realize it's really not that long ago.
Precisely.
So, what is a vortex? That's something I used to hear about, too.
Yeah, the vortex is just I guess the simple definition of it is the hurricane has it, the tornado has it, everything, a low-pressure center has a vortex, a center of circulation.
So, I'm trying to remember when it was.
A tornado vortex is so visible because of the V, so everybody kind of says that's it, but it's a broader definition than that. But they will refer to a tornado. Oh, there's the vortex of the tornado.
So maybe about 8 years ago, I guess, in California, they were stuck in a cycle, and they were using the word vortex, some kind of vortex they were stuck in. And
and they use a lot of terminology. It's funny because tornadoes and hurricanes, a lot of the terminology I've used my whole life, just caught on the last few years. Now everybody talks about it. Supercell. Everybody talks. No one knew what a supercell was at FSU. 20 years ago, no one. That was my nickname, supercell, because even in the meteorology, they weren't too aware of the term because Florida doesn't deal with supercells. The Great Plains do.
What is a supercell?
It's a single thunderstorm that doesn't require any help from the environment around, like a cold front or stuff, to really get going. It basically takes off on its own. And once it's taking off on its own, it can go for a very long time as a very strong storm. Not all of them, but a lot of them drop tornadoes. And they can do it they're a standalone storm. So you'll see on radar, you see these, here's something very important to remember if you're ever watching the radar. And they say there's a lot of tornadoes in this. The more storms you see on a radar and the more rain and the bright flashing and there's lightning all over the place, the less big tornadoes you're going to have. You might have a lot of small ones, but there's no supercells. There's nothing that can grab all that energy and bundle it. When you see these separate storms, like they're separated by 50 miles or so, and they look like little blobs or little scorpions, you got danger. Oof. Because a supercell is now building its own environment. And they become their own, this isn't totally accurate, but they become their own mini little hurricane, basically.
And lightning, are you excited about lightning?
Yeah, and I also respect that I've been hit by it twice. I was a kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
you got hit by lightning twice?
Yeah, I got hit by a tree next to a tree, and then one time I was in our house, and I was like 10 years old in Virginia, and I'm leaning on the metal trim, and it hit the house, and it jolted me, and it threw me back. The time I got hit next to the tree was Amarillo, Texas, and I was like sick for 3 days. It makes you feel like you had the flu.
Really?
Yeah. So after that, I worked at Busch Gardens for a few years in Tampa, while we had our little church down there in the inner city, and my job as a manager at Busch Gardens. I remember all the Central America, Brazil, Colombia, all these people would come up, and they were used to thunderstorms. They're running through the park with lightning crackling all over the place, and they're just screaming and having fun running around, and I'm going, oh my God, all these lightning rods out there, because Florida lightning is deadly, really deadly. Basically, it's the charge. Like here in New Hampshire, our thunderstorms are like about 30,000, so the arc, the lightning, let's put it this way, the lightning bolt's a lot shorter, so it doesn't have as intense of a charge. So up here you get hit by lightning, you wouldn't die more than likely, but it wouldn't feel good. In Florida, yeah, 40 or 50,000 feet. So when you get that arc coming down from that thing, it's a powerful bolt. That's why Florida lightning kills.
Yeah, my boys used to, well, you know my boys, I grew up with your boys. They used to love to decorate for Halloween, and they forgot they had a metal spider on a tree.
Oh, wow.
And it
Yeah.
got hit by lightning.
Yeah.
Because there was a line
There's a
that went
lightning
above
rod.
it. Yeah, and below it. So we had to take the tree down. My daughter, poor thing, she screamed. She said it was the scariest noise and my daughter's pretty tough, but she screamed and said it was the scariest thing that ever
What makes
happened.
lightning so scary to me is you
was so
literally have
loud.
no clue where it's going to hit. A tornado, you at least have a little bit of warning, and I'm usually watching for them, so a couple of minutes. A hurricane, you have days of wanting to prepare for it. Lightning, it's like, boom, it's there, and next thing you know, someone's been hit, or it's... And if you're driving down the road, we've been in many of them in the Great Plains where there's probably literally, like in Kansas, I can think of 2 instances at night we're trying to drive to get to a hotel or get out of the main storm band, and we have lightning coming at probably, 10 strikes a second. A second, not a minute, a second.
That means you're right.
So it's
under
just,
it,
it's
right?
like strobing. It's like a strobe light for like an hour straight.
And there's all different kinds of lightning
and
too.
you're blinded.
And
You
you've seen
can't
it all.
see anything.
You've seen all
yeah.
the lightning.
The only thing I've never really seen a lot of is ball lightning. It's about the size of a basketball. It'll break off and it literally will bounce across.
Oh,
It'll bounce into a house.
Yeah, you had brought some still shots too, because I remember
yeah,
seeing
probably
pictures
so.
of
Yeah,
hail.
yeah, you can throw them
Big
up there.
giant.
So this is a beautiful one. This is a supercell. It's dying out. We're northwest Kansas, looking to the west at the sunset, but you can see the nice arc with the rain behind it and all the clouds flowing out of it. So it's dissipating. It's dropped from about 100 to about 65 degrees here in about 20
wow.
minutes.
That's
It's
pretty
beautiful.
cool.
Yeah, it's my wife loves those shots. That's the same storm that's northwest of Cheyenne.
Yep.
That became an F2. It did a lot of damage. No one died, thank God. And there were like 9 twisters that day in that area. A lot of chasers too.
There it
And that was the same storm. We'd gone over to the interstate, drove north a few miles, found an overpass, got under it, and that came down.
So we used to live in Texas, and when they
That's
had
more of it.
hail, the next day the cars were all on sale.
Yeah, right.
Drop
I
the
know.
price.
Oh, it smashes. That stuff smashes the crud. If it's bigger than quarters, it starts doing damage. And I've lost a car to it.
Wow. Has anybody died from being hit by hail?
Yeah, actually quite not a lot.
And
but
their
yeah.
last words
Here's
were,
something
"What
else-
the hell
Here's something
is
else about
that?"
something else about hail. I've been telling people that's the same surge in Tampa that you saw the video
the
of
car,
earlier.
yeah,
Yep,
that's not
a
your
still
car,
shot, which is very cool, epic stuff there. That may have one in there I took of the neighborhood, the houses. I waded out to the water about waist deep and got a shot. They just look. That's it, right? That's one of them. It's about waist deep water there. That's kind of dangerous because you don't know what's floating in the water. And there's the other one. I'm looking out toward the harbor, and the water here is about 2 to 3 feet deep, and it's already in the houses up above the porches.
Whoa.
Again, they were not warned about this.
Okay, we saw that.
This caught everybody off guard. So what you asked me a question. What was the question? Before I took off.
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, it's again, where I'm moving into now is I'm really trying to move even into weather education, that's the reason the storm warning started. It wasn't just supposed to be a cool chase thing.
So it's on Facebook, the storm warning.
Exactly.
And if you bring back your show on Merrimack TV,
we're posting
tell us
stuff
every
like
week.
this. We're posting that you could share with your kids, and I've got one I'll read here real quick. This is an excerpt from here. And he says, this is 1954. He says, something incredible happened in the frigid New England. Again, he's writing this in 1954. For the second time in 54 years, a whole December in Massachusetts without snow was recorded. The coastal waters of Massachusetts are running 2 to 3 degrees warmer than average, higher than in the last 50 years. And he goes on to talk about how that's just going to get worse and worse. Then there's about 2 or 3 pages later. I mean, this book here is packed with this stuff. He says, in West Texas in 1953, there has been no rain whatsoever for 4 years. Now, I lived in West Texas.
That's where we live too. Where did you live?
Midland, Lubbock, and
I
Amarillo.
know. Okay, Midland, where the little girl fell in the well.
Yes.
And I knew one of the brothers.
Did you?
Of the rescuers.
Yeah.
That
The
Pfeiffer.
well she fell in was about a half a block from my house,
Wow.
where I lived, where I went to.
Jessica McClure.
Yep.
That was, I had my.
We had just
Joseph
left
was
when that
born,
happened.
So it was 87?
Yeah, because we had just left. We had just moved away about a month.
We lived in San Angelo, but
Okay,
I
yeah, I know
remember
that area
meeting, there
too.
were 3 brothers, the Pfeiffer brothers, and one of them,
San Angelo was prettier than Midland,
yeah,
but Midland had more money.
it was windy. It was just windy all
Oh,
the time,
my
but
gosh.
the sky was so beautiful. It's such a beautiful blue
But I mean, out there it will
sky.
get dry, and they're talking about a drought now. Noah is out that way. 4 years. People remember this too. When I lived out there, they told me, they said there's been times we go for years without rain in West Texas.
Well,
So I mean, if this happened now, people would be thinking it's the end of the
longer?
world.
Yeah.
We have seen so. And here, I'll throw this out. This gets very controversial, but because I love this stuff. I love weather. I love the urban planning. You have these cities flooding like Miami. They're on a flipping sandbar. New Orleans is in a bowl. The Indians told the French, don't do it. The French told the British, don't do it. And the British told the Americans, don't do it. Don't build here. And then we had to build all this levee system. And we're very proud of what we've done. It's a bowl. You know, Harvey hits Texas, and the Weather Channel's covering it. And they say, we're here in Buffalo Bayou where we're seeing massive flooding. Stop, Buffalo Bayou. Look it up, Google it. Buffalo Bayou is a swamp.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. What was your favorite storm?
My favorite one, I would say, as far as tornadoes go, was the first one we caught in White Deer, Texas in 1999, 2001? Boy, Josh and Caleb would remember. 20-some years ago. Because the whole family was there, and it was such a cool storm, and nobody got hurt, but it was just epic. It was just, and I've got stills on that because back then there was no digital video. Hurricanes would be Hurricane Laura in Lake Charles, because that thing was just... I mean, we had buildings flying over top of us, and we drove back in the eye wall because people lost us up here. We were live streaming, and we got back to the hotel. The roof was gone in our hotel. Our room was flooded. It was 2 inches of water. We were 4 stories up. There was water everywhere. We laid down, get up, and the city's been destroyed. And it was an incredible storm.
Have you ever been disappointed, like you expected a great, epic storm, and it was
many
boring?
times.
Yeah.
I'd say 80% of the time it's that way. But that's why I tell people, we did it to be with family, and you made an adventure out of it. Yeah.
Family fun night, chasing a storm.
Yeah.
Our first winter here was 1998, and that December I don't think there was any snow.
Probably not.
Because
no. When we moved here in 2004, there were a couple of winters there in the beginning that were very warm, and the golf courses were open and everything. It's New England. That is what it does up here. Mm-hmm. I've got other books at home and from 8, 9.
Now, what is the name of your book? I have a copy of it.
It's called Storm Warriors.
Storm Warriors, and it's for children.
Yep, it's for children, 10 and under, and it's called Saving a King. Yep, and then there's also a journal out there too. What's the title of that? My journal.
What's the name of the guy who started the Weather Channel? I met him.
Joe Diello. Yes, you have. Joe Diello. He lives in Hudson. Good guy.
Okay, so we're out of time, but I think you should bring your show back. Don't you agree? Yes, you do. So thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Pastor Ron.
It's great. No, it's good.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.